Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Open Mic Foundation. I am Seshni Naidu, and I would like to welcome you to the show. And it is Women's Day in South Africa. So, welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. We are currently streaming on different platforms. On Facebook page of the Open Mic Foundation, at the private group, which is the Open Mic for Women, and also our YouTube channel. So thank you so much for joining. Today's talk is about debunking the myths and conceptions about prenups. And this is a follow on talk that we have from the previous conversation of our kitchen talks. And I'm going to introduce you quickly to our speaker. Before we do that, I want to say to everyone, thank you so much for all the support that has been going on with Open Mic Foundation. And in celebration of Women's Day, we had a yoga flow class yesterday. So thank you so much. I also want to, bring awareness to our platforms. We are on Instagram, Open Mic Foundation _ you can also find us on Facebook and also on YouTube as well. Have a look, search, and please share with everyone. So I want to introduce you to our speaker today. She's all the way from Cape Town. And I want to share with you her experience and her insights. And let's open up the show and welcome our speaker. And good morning, Ashley.
Hi, good morning, Seshni. How are you?
I'm all right, not too bad. Thank you so much for joining us today on a very early Monday morning. We decided to do it very differently today, and just to have people come in the morning because it is a public holiday in South Africa. It is Women's Day. So happy Women's Day to you.
Yes, and same to you. And thank you for this opportunity of empowering women with information on such an important day, such as Women's Day.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a relevant topic. A lot of people have been, have a lot of misconceptions and a lot of assumptions through other people and what has been shared, with their experiences. And sometimes it's good to have someone to come in and share with us the true insights of what is actually happening right now, in the courts, and if also from a legal perspective as well. So I want to welcome you guys. Please share your comments. If you are streaming from, or if you are viewing from Facebook, from the private group, or from the YouTube channel, you are welcome to share your comments. We will definitely be able to see your comments. Just say hi to us. Whatever you guys are saying is coming through the broadcast live through. And if you have any comments, we have somebody's already saying hi. Thank you guys so much. If you can put your name in, no problem. If you want to stay anonymous, that's also fine as well, no problem. Share your insights. Have any comments or questions for Ashley? She is actually here to answer your questions for you. And if there's anything that you want to, understand a little bit better, you guys are welcome to post it into the comments. You do come up anonymous as well, so please make sure that you guys are free. It is a safe space, and you guys are welcome. So Ashley, do you want to introduce yourself, please? Where you're from, the law firm you're from, and just give us a little bit of insights. From which side of the world are you coming from?
Yeah, sure. So you can see my name is Ashley Curran. I'm an attorney, conveyancer, and notary public at a firm called Curran Attorneys. So we are based in Claremont, the southern suburbs of Cape Town. I am a family law specialist. That is my area of expertise and passion. And I've been practicing in that particular area of law for now over 14 years in total. From that, there's various offshoots. We also specialize in property law and a bit of commercial law. But generally, my passion is on the family law front, and extremely passionate about informing individuals, making sure that they have the necessary information at their fingertips to make decisions that might have far-reaching consequences either throughout their marriage or at a later stage if their marriage comes to an end.
All right. Thank you so much, Ashley. Appreciate that. So let's talk about, I mean, you chose this title about, the debunking myths and misconceptions about prenups. Now, we've had two kitchen talks prior, which was in June, with the youth of South Africa, talking about, is marriage still relevant today? We had two beautiful ladies come on last month, which talked about modern versus fairy tale marriages. And, there's so much of different views of what is so relevant today and what we as women, should be doing and what we should be looking out for. So before I go into, shaping the conversation, I think, I'm going to hand it over to you to share some insights of what is actually happening at this moment. And also for you to bring, a little bit of understanding around prenups as well. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Ashley.
Okay. So I think at this stage, it's important just to give some practical insight into the decisions that women are making in terms of whether or not they're getting married. There has been a very strong shift towards cohabiting and not so much opting for marriage. Yeah, so that certainly is a trend at the moment where women are not necessarily opting to get married. But if they're opting not to get married, there are very specific contracts that are required on that front to afford financial protection to living with your partner, cohabiting. So that's a conversation for a separate day. But the decision that women make if they're going to get married, then again, it really is what solid foundation are you wanting to lay with your partner in terms of communicating about finances, protecting your financial futures together, which ties in certainly with the conversations beforehand that uh, everlasting love versus fairy tale marriage versus conscious separating. An antenuptial contract has a twofold purpose. The first being coming into the marriage, communicating openly with your partner. What are your expectations from a financial point of view? What assets are you wanting to protect? And then, if you are going to have to consciously separate and divorce at a future point in time, then what rules and rules of engagement and boundaries have you put in place to ensure that there's going to be a fair settlement? So that probably leads me into one of the misconceptions about antenuptial contracts, which is that you're preempting your divorce. It is a stigma that has been around for many, many years. It kind of stems from the 80s, where there was a lot of negativity around antenuptial contracts. So that's probably one of the biggest myths that I come up against in terms of antenuptial contracts. And it certainly is a myth that needs to be debunked as quickly as possible. Signing an antenuptial contract, and perhaps let me stop there and just refer to some terminology. So in America, we call it, an American term for it is a prenup. In South Africa, we call it an antenuptial contract. So those terms I'll use interchangeably. And more specifically, we generally refer to it as a marriage contract. One of the biggest myths, though, is, like I said, that you're preempting your divorce, and it really couldn't be further from the truth. So, like I said, you're wanting to come into this marriage with a solid foundation of communication, managing expectations, having that conversation. What happens if I've built up the successful career beforehand? Do I want to share that with my partner? Don't I? So it really creates the opportunity for you and your partner to have these very serious conversations about finances and then be on the same page. It's not preempting your divorce. On the contrary, it is creating an environment that's going to be less stressful for the two of you financially. It does ensure that you will have financial independence, that if one of you is affected by, let's say, a bad credit record, that the one doesn't go down with the other. So it really creates a very solid foundation financially. And that is one of the key aspects of a successful marriage in terms of maybe minimizing some financial pressure later down the line. So it certainly does not preempt a divorce. It doesn't deal with aspects that typically get dealt with in a divorce. It doesn't deal with maintenance of children. It doesn't deal with personal maintenance. It really just deals with making sure that you are married out of community of property, which means from a legal perspective and financially, the law and the courts look at you as two individuals, and then to decide, what do you want to share? What don't you want to share? Do you want to share it all? Do you want to remain financially separate in terms of accumulation of assets? Do you want to share what you're bringing into the marriage, but not necessarily what you accumulated before? So you can see that there's quite a lot of aspects that is not only there to be discussed in terms of if you're getting divorced, but many that's going to be important throughout a marriage in terms of the laying the necessary foundations. So that's one of the biggest myths that I do see in practice.
I think a lot of the myths that you just spoke about right now, in terms of, you're already looking for a divorce, or you're kind of planning, for a divorce before you even married. It does come a lot about the belief systems that we have. It comes through culture and religion as well. I can tell you that firsthand myself. Um, I was brought up in a family where, there's no such thing as these things. I mean, but I got married very young, right? So, in terms of that, we didn't have the option at that point in time whether we wanted to get married. It wasn't an option that was laid out for me at that given point in time. I think today where women are, I think they're much more guided, they're much more informed about the choices that they have. I still find that we don't do what's right for ourselves, though. I feel that, we tend to want to just give because women are feminine and they come from that nurturing background. So it's for me, it's that myth that you're referring to is still there. And by you say and that by you bringing that out, it's quite interesting, because I'm sure you're seeing that at the clients that is coming through your way, right?
Yeah, yeah. Look, the trend is certainly changing. What I am noticing is that there is a fear in women to talk about finances, to raise this discussion and say, can we have an open and frank conversation about what our expectations are, what we are, the values that we're wanting to bring into this marriage in terms of, is it going to be a joint team effort? There's certainly a shift. I'm seeing more and more women are speaking out and asking to discuss this topic. The shift is also coming in the sense that people are getting married a bit later in life. So couples are coming in with a bigger kind of asset base. They've built up their careers, they've bought properties. South Africa is a very entrepreneurial country, so there are a lot of business owners that are coming to see me. And that really is creating the platform to start having these conversations and questioning the cultural, the religious beliefs and the stigma that's gone around antenuptial contracts.
Okay.
It's a generational
Yeah.
stigma that we haven't yet gotten rid
Yes.
of. So,
Yeah.
like I said, in the 80s, there was, well, predating the 80s, there was only one of two options. You either got married in community of property, which is the default scenario in South Africa, or you got married out of community of property. And in order to do that, you sign an antenuptial contract. But before 1984, that was it. It was either in
Yeah.
community of property or out of community of property. And there was a lot of mistrust around husbands or wives at that point wanting you to sign an antenuptial contract. It was considered or deemed to be a you don't want to share, you don't trust me. So that has still filtered down. And then in 1984, this wonderful, wonderful aspect of what we call accrual came into place, where it was this combination of the two, where yes, we want to kind of share in the growth of assets, but we still want that financial protection. And that's when everything changed. And that's where it became a game changer. That Matrimonial Property Act was introduced in 1984, which now gives the couples an option still to have the, strictly speaking, out of community of property, or to have a bit of both, the best of both worlds. But it is a generational aspect. We still, we're in the early stages of that really filtering down to all cultures, generations, religious institutions. There is still a massive level of mistrust around these antenuptial contracts.
Yeah, I do think, there's more education that needs to be shared, from a legal perspective, and we need to try to understand how do we help ourselves, so that we don't go into something blindly, leave alone that, but also understand what you're getting yourself into. Me being an entrepreneur as well, it's not something to be taken lightly, especially when you get into a relationship, or when basically in a marriage, because there's certain level of protection that you do need to make, not only for yourself but for your family,
Yes.
right? And there's a certain level of risk that one has to take as well. So for me as well, I think people need to seek the legal advice that's needed,
Mm.
have a broader understanding of what is actually this whole thing entails, for you to make a decision, to make actually a comfortable and confident decision in whatever you're trying to do, right? can
Yes.
you can you share with us, what does it mean to be married in community of property? I mean, I know. I mean, I
Mm.
think share what it means to be. I mean, we're talking about, prenups, but what does it mean to be married in community of property these days?
Yeah. So, as I mentioned earlier, the default situation in South Africa is you are automatically married in community of property, and the only way you can change that is if you do sign this prenup or antenuptial. So, what it means to be married in community of property is, from a legal and financial perspective, you are deemed to be one person. You are financially and legally joint at the hip. So your assets become your husband or your wife's assets. Liabilities, debts, you share those. So you can't escape the kind of noose around one's neck if your husband or wife has incurred a substantial amount of debt. If there's a business that's failed, there's not going to be the protection afforded to the spouse in terms of the assets that they might have accumulated. So it really, to put it very simply, is you are joint at the hip financially. What the one spouse does affects the other person, whether positively or negatively. You're going to suffer those consequences either way.
Yeah, I do believe, we do have to understand what is people's, their dreams and desires. You need to understand that person. It's one thing signing a contract and putting these things in place. It's another thing about, do you truly understand who the other person is in order for
Mm.
you to sign and to make sure that you've made the right decision, right?
Yeah.
Because, we grow and we evolve as time moves on, and sometimes at that given point in time, you may have the right relation, you may have, the contract in front of you with the decisions that you need to make. However, if you step back from that, there's much more outside of that. That's also an understanding that needs to happen of self.
Mm. Yeah,
you know
absolutely. Yeah.
it's much bigger than just signing, a contract and to say, you know these are my assets, this is what belongs to me, and as I move along, it's got to do with, and I'm talking by my own experience, right? I'm not saying this is to anyone else. When you're in a position, in a position at this moment in your current job, or you're an entrepreneur at that point, sometimes we kind of look ahead and say, okay, these are some of the things that I would want to achieve. These are some of the things, the risks that I want to take. These are some of the factors I should be considering as well, not only for myself, but also of my partner, right?
Mm.
These things will influence those decisions because, like you've mentioned before, your values play an important role in this as well. What do you set out to do as well going forward? And what is it that you want to accomplish from your dreams or your desires? All of these factors contribute to making a decision like this. I'm not too sure what's your view on
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
Ashley.
Yeah, look, if I just look at the couples that I meet with on a weekly basis, I can see the various reactions to the signing of the dotted line. And the amount of anxiety that I see walk through my office indicates to me that this is a far bigger decision than just signing an agreement to make sure that our assets are
Yep.
protected. And it does come into that bigger picture. What are the values as a couple that you're wanting to bring into this relationship? And that conversation needs to happen. It very often doesn't happen before they come into my office, but it needs to happen. It needs to take place. What are the values that you're wanting to bring in here? From a legal perspective, and in terms of this marriage contract, to the outside world, all they need to know is that you're married out of community of property, and they need to look at you as two separate individuals. But the far greater question and decision is, as a couple, what are the values that you're wanting to bring in here? Is it then that you're wanting to equally share in any accumulation? What happens if one of you is a business owner? So there is a much bigger picture here. What happens if one of you passes away? What do you want to
Def-
happen at that point? So it's not just divorce and this mistrust. There is a far greater picture here. And like I say, if I just look at the reaction and the heavy weight on the shoulders of certain couples, it is indicative of the fact that this is a much, much greater decision than just a legal signing an agreement. There
and
are very serious conversations that need to take place as a couple in terms of how you see your future planning out from a fundamental values point of view.
yeah, absolutely, right? Because we see a piece of paper, we don't step back and we don't look at the bigger picture of what are we trying to achieve as a couple, as a family, what are we entering, what are some of the things that we want to accomplish together or separately
Mm.
for that matter, which is
Yeah,
nothing wrong with that, right? And
yeah.
hence why I say it is so important. I mean, when I had the talk with the youth, they were on the fence about marriage, and I
Mm.
could sense them, the uncertainty that was leading to them had got to do with you know what have I've accomplished,
Mm.
it's mine, it's got that protectiveness over it. So a lot of things comes from I have built this and I have created this, and again, not knowing how a prenup works and how it protects one, and
Mm.
these are conversations that you do need to have, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a question, for I'm going to show it up on the screen. Ashley, just have a look there. Was one of the Facebook users. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate the questions that are coming through to Ashley. And the question is, in second marriages, what do you generally advise a couple to consider in the planning of their marriage contract? What an amazing question. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, that is a really great question. So just as a kind of proviso, there's not a one size fits all here. It is really going to depend on the personal circumstances of each couple. But generally in second marriages, the advice is to consider the without accrual option, which would mean that you remain separate financially before, during, and after a marriage. And the reason why that advice generally is given to second marriage couples is that there is often children from previous marriages. So you don't want there to be any complications at a kind of deceased estate, administration of estate planning perspective, where you might want to leave an inheritance to your children, but now there's a complication because there's an antenuptial contract that says, hang on, you've got to pay your spouse out X amount of money first before your children can inherit. So the children from previous marriages plays a big part. Secondly, second marriages tend to, not always, but generally couples, husbands and wives are a bit older, a bit more established in their careers, in their kind of asset base that they've accumulated, and they believe that there's no reason really to blur the lines in terms of what they've owned before and during the marriage. So again, they tend to want to keep their assets entirely separate. Nothing prevents couples from making decisions as they go along in their marriage to jointly buy a property together. So they can still accumulate assets together. There's just not a piece of paper that's telling them they have to share in certain assets when the marriage comes to an end. And a marriage ends, divorce or death. People think it's only divorce, but it's also if one spouse passes away. So
Yeah.
generally the advice is to consider a without accrual option.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you so much for the Facebook user that posted that question. It's so relevant because we do get into, second marriages, in some cases, third marriages as well, right? And
Yeah.
we tend to not really, look at some of the things that, we have accrued. And obviously, people, we've all make mistakes and we all learn from our mistakes. The idea is that when you do go into these second marriages, make sure that you're aware much more, you're much more wiser, you've grown
Mm.
as well, right? And circumstances have changed as well, so it does changes things a lot.
Yeah.
To the Facebook user, thank you so much for posting that question. Guys, I want to share with you guys, please post your questions, any comments, anything that you'd want to ask Ashley. She is here to consult with you guys, and obviously, to bring out some awareness to you guys if there's anything else further that you guys want to discuss. So Ashley, what is, I mean, we've been in a pandemic now. We're going close to 18 months. We're moving over closer to that 2 year mark. So I have been hearing, and please correct me if I'm wrong. I could be very wrong on this. Um, there's more divorces that's happening of recent because of the pandemic, and people being in lockdown. It has caused a little bit of a stir up
Mm.
in marriages. From what I understand, is that the divorce rate has increased. I'm not too sure. What are the divorce rates sitting at right now? I have no idea. Hence why I'm
Yeah.
asking, right?
So essentially, you are 100% on the mark there. There has been a significant increase. I do believe it's featured quite prominently in the news, either tongue-in-cheek comments or the
Yeah.
reality of it. But there certainly has been a significant increase in the institution of legal proceedings for couples wanting to get divorced quite soon after hard lockdown, and more so as the months have continued on. So interestingly, South Africa has quite a low divorce rate compared to the rest of the world. It's an
Okay.
interesting, yeah. So it can be, there might be a number of factors, but kind of worldwide, we've only got a 17% divorce rate compared to Russia, which is one of the highest divorce rate countries in the world. They sit at about 35%. So it's an
Russia.
interesting, yes, yeah, Russia interestingly has one of the highest divorce rates.
Wow. Okay. I
Yeah.
never knew that. Good to
Yeah. So
know.
look, again, there's a number of factors that might affect the stats. It might be that younger couples are not, or couples in general are not opting to get married anymore. So there's no kind of formal tracking of do they part ways or don't they.
Hmm.
But generally we have one of the lower divorce rates compared to the rest of the world. Post lockdown, there has been anywhere between a 20% to 35% increase in divorce rates from the previous years. So we are seeing a rapid increase in couples calling it quits and making the decision now that it's time to part ways. Just from my experience and what I've seen, it seems to be attributed to the close proximity within which couples have had to kind of cohabit through hard lockdown and lockdown. Interestingly enough, homeschooling, the stress of homeschooling children has seemed to have a quite a significant impact on marital relationships. So that, from research perspective, has appeared to be a contributing factor. There's a lot of inward kind of reflection and really trying to take stock of, is this where I want to be in my life? Is this who I want to be with? Where am I going? So really what I'm seeing is a lot of people are doing a lot of that inward reflection and trying to reassess, how did they get here? Why are they here? And is this where they want to be for the rest of their lives? So
Hmm.
that process also seems to be underway. At the moment, 53% of the divorces, it's women that are instituting proceedings. So there definitely seems to be a step up from the kind of female aspect to either take matters into their own hands, have the courage to
Wow.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
a high number.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's an interesting shift. Typically, again, whether it's cultural, traditional, religious, but it takes a lot of courage to make a decision to leave a marriage, and it's
Yeah.
one that women have probably uh, fallen into the trap of needing to consider others. I can't do this because of my children. What will
Yep.
the community think? What will my family
Yep.
think? So again, that trend seems to be changing, and there has been
So
post-lockdown an increase.
I'm just curious, right? And I think whoever's watching is probably also curious, right?
Okay.
So you say 53% of women now have obviously, filed for divorce. And listen,
Yeah,
it's
they're the
confidential.
plaintiffs. Yeah, yeah,
So they're the plaintiffs, right? So can you share on that stat what has been the overall consensus of why? I'm just curious right now.
yeah.
I have my own
Look,
understanding why
yeah,
they would be. I mean, a lot of people, and I must say this is another myth that we come across, right? That the reason why someone is getting a divorce is because the person is having an affair,
mm,
and that's not the case,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
I find that people think that people divorce because someone's having an affair or there's infidelity that has been, uh, you know, how can I say, had. But in some cases, it's not the case. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. I'm not saying that it's not. Maybe it is. Maybe because of the 53% people have done it, I wouldn't know. I'm just curious. As an overall
Yeah.
statistics, what are your thoughts on that? Why do you think? What was the cause, or what was the reason why women had were the
Yeah.
plaintiffs?
Yeah. If I look at the recent few months of my divorce practice, it is very the stats and the reasons for the breakdown of a marriage is not related to infidelity, which is again an
Yes.
interesting stat.
Yes.
There many of the divorces that I've assisted and dealt with recently, there has been no infidelity at all. So
Yeah.
the kind of stereotype of, oh, someone must have had an affair and someone,
Yes.
had
Yeah.
stepped out of the marriage, that kind of trend is also dissipating as the months and years are unfolding. There seems to be a lot of financial pressure, financial
Okay.
stress. So that again seems to be a massive trigger in terms of reasons for couples wanting to get divorced. There might be a number of reasons. The financial stress, sometimes splitting and divorcing just compounds that. So it makes me think that there were other kind of cracks perhaps in the marriage besides the financial stress. And then the financial difficulties was just kind of the final straw that broke the camel's back. But
Okay.
it seems to be a number of factors. Women have outgrown their partners, whether it's
Yep.
career-wise. I'm seeing a lot of that. A lot
Yep.
of women have just really continued on an upward trajectory in their careers, financially. There is still quite a sense of disconnect at women earning more than men. So
Yep.
I'm generalizing it. It's not in every single case that I deal with, but there are those factors that are still creeping in.
Yeah, yeah. I must admit as well, me being the breadwinner of my family as well, it was a shift where you very rarely find women who choose the breadwinner. Today's society, women has shifted in terms of who the breadwinner is. There's no such thing as a man being the breadwinner anymore. I have been in corporate for 20 years. I know what it's like to be the forefront from that perspective. And when the woman is the plaintiff and the one that it is, they think it's, from a financial, and it's not. There's much
Mm,
more towards it than, just that. Very, very interesting question that has come up. Facebook user, thank you so much. The questions are on the screen, Ashley, if you can see it.
yeah.
Modern women who have their own careers and businesses often opt to rather not get married, but stay independent even though living together. Two questions, two-part questions. Firstly, what do we do if that suits us better to go this route? And is there a legal agreement that one should consider if the combined living eventually goes pear-shaped? So true.
Again, that's such an excellent question because it's going to lead into one of the biggest myths in South Africa, and that's the notion of a common law wife, which does not exist. Please, we need to
It
get
really
that.
doesn't. I didn't even
It
know
does.
that.
It does not. So this is a fantastic question because it does lead into that topic. So just in terms of one woman being very independent, career orientated, their own businesses, the decision to get married is a value-based one. I mean, there's no attorney that's going to tell you, yes, you must get married, or no, you mustn't get married. Getting married won't affect your independence if you go for an antenuptial contract and consider the without accrual option. So if you want to get married, but you're worried about that independent aspect, you can still get married, but then get an antenuptial contract, possibly without accrual. But if from a value perspective or it's a personal decision, you and your partner don't want to consider getting married or don't want to get married and you want to live together, then it is absolutely essential to get what we call a cohabitation agreement signed. It's very similar to an antenuptial contract. It details the rights and responsibilities, the financial expectations that the two of you have, who will pay for what, who will own assets if you're going to accumulate those assets. So again, it really just draws a line in the sand, gets everyone on the same page, and details exactly what's what in terms of your finances and, more importantly, your financial independence. So that's the legal agreement. It is called a cohabitation agreement, or there's or is sometimes referred to as a universal partnership agreement. And that then would regulate what would happen if the combined living arrangement does go pear-shaped.
So, when do you suggest one put that type of agreement in place? Before you move in, after you stay with somebody for a year, 2 years? I mean, when would an agreement like that make sense to put in? I mean, I wouldn't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I mean, a lot of women are under the misconception that there is this common law wife understanding in South African law that if you live with someone, you're automatically entitled to rights to maintenance, a right to maybe share in the what you've accumulated together. So that doesn't exist. And the only document that's going to give you those rights is if you sign this cohabitation agreement. Again, it's going to come down to the communication you need to have with your partner. It might not be moving in straight off the bat wanting to have this conversation, but the question is, how difficult is it going to become as the years go on? It's kind of, you're going to have to somewhat unscramble an egg if it's many years down the line, and now you're trying to convince your partner, look, we have to get something in writing. So my advice is try and have that conversation sooner rather than later. Perhaps have the conversation before you move in. So if there's a decision, look, we're going to move in together, then that might be the perfect time to say, great, can we just document what our expectations are, kind of what our financial commitments are to each other, and then get that in writing. It's very
Yeah.
difficult. My experience tells me that it's very difficult for couples to get that in place years down the line. And then very often it's too late. It's only at that point when they need the contract that they think about it, and then there isn't one.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I also think that, if you have kids as well, it does play a role, right? So, whether it's the modern woman that is, owning their own business, if you're single, never been married, whether it's second marriages, and, if you guys are thinking of, being roommates or living together, whatever it may be, and there's kids involved, I think my suggestion or recommendation is rather put it in place as early as possible. And to your point, Ashley, going in later and doing it at a later stage, it could cause friction, right? And it could cause a lot of discomfort for people as well. Because moving in with somebody at one point and then later coming back and says, can we put this cohabiting agreement in place? And it's like, what are you smoking? you know and all of a sudden it was never discussed, and now you want to put something in place because maybe something's changed, right? Maybe
Yes.
somebody won the lotto, right? And
And
listen, I'm
yeah.
being so real right now, right?
Yeah, yeah. And it's a massive trigger for, we must remember that individuals, we all come with our little suitcase of triggers and
Yeah.
baggage and also, and for some individuals, it's going to be a massive emotional trigger for years down the line, out of the blue, to simply go, okay, I want to talk about a cohabitation agreement. So you're kind of on the back foot if you do it years down the line, because your partner might automatically think, but where is this coming from? And then the kind of seed of doubt gets planted.
Yeah.
And that might then have unintentional consequences for your relationship. So rather do it earlier on. There are factors that can complicate it, but certainly if there's children involved, rather try and just have that conversation once, get it on paper, and then carry on.
Yeah. So I think my last question for you, Ashley, is that, if you are currently in a marriage that is community of property, and I think a lot of women out there is married in community of property, right? Um, can you change that agreement? I know you can. If you can share with us what are the um, changing factors about sharing the current condition of the contract?
So you can change we refer to it as your marital regime. You can change it. There is legislation that does give you the option to change from in community of property to out of community of property. However, it is a very expensive process, and there's a number of requirements that make it quite difficult for couples to change their marital regime from in community to out. First of all, it is an application that has to be brought in the High Court. Any decision that affects your marital status is one that the South African courts take very seriously because it has a knock-on effect with the banks, if you've owned property, if you owe people money. So it has to go through the High Court, and there's an application that you need to bring and a number of factors to prove. You would have to give notice to all your creditors. They would need to then consent to this change, and only once they've consented to it would you then have what we call permission from the courts to change from in community to out. So it's by no means a straightforward process. The option does exist, but it can be very challenging to get that through the court system. And again, it's going to require buy-in from your husband or your wife, your partner. So you're going to have the conversation and see what's brought you to this point of wanting to change it from in to out of community, and then if it's practically and legally possible to pursue that option.
Okay. Is there any other options should anyone else can take in terms of, you know, I'm trying to share some insights in terms of, you are married in community of property. Do you have an opt to move out of that? Yes, you do have an opt. You can change it. You have to go to the High Court. And to Ashley's point, it's very expensive. Leave alone that is that it has to be consented on the other side as well. So Ashley, is there anything else around that, or is it just that's the only procedure that we can do?
Yeah, from a legal perspective, that is the only procedure that can be followed.
Okay. All
If
right.
the marriage is not kind of in its final stages, if there's not an imminent divorce or
Okay.
any, then the only option available to change is this High Court application.
Okay. All right. All right. All right, guys. Is there any more questions, guys? Any more comments? Any thoughts? Please share with us. We're going to be wrapping up this call right now. We would like to hear what are your thoughts, what are your comments, and if you have any last final questions. Um, Ashley, I'm not too sure. So Ashley has given the Open Mic Foundation to sponsor a 30 minutes consultation with Ashley. The Facebook user, which I don't know who it is because it came through anonymous, the Facebook user, can I ask you to please contact me directly? Two ways. Either you can send me a Facebook Messenger message to tell me that it's you, and I will keep your identity to myself. So do not worry about that. I respect people and I respect who they are. If you cannot do that, you are welcome to email me. It's openmicfoundation@outlook.com. And I would like to give you, you've posed two very interesting and relevant questions today. So if you can share with me who you are, Ashley will definitely give you a 30 minutes free consultation with her. If you're not in Cape Town, don't worry. We can always, arrange a Zoom call for you. So if you can contact me directly, I would greatly appreciate and would like to gift you something of this. And if you're not willing to take it on, no problem. Don't worry about it. It sounds just something that Ashley, thought about giving it to the users. Ashley, any last final comments or, thoughts from your side regarding this topic?
Yeah, I think just closing comments from my side, one of my favorite mantras is knowledge is power. Please,
Oh, yeah.
to all women out there, get as much knowledge and information as you can about the legal consequences of getting married, what the options are. The information is really going to assist and inform you about what's going to best suit your circumstances. And consult with an attorney that is familiar with antenuptial contracts, is able to play out a few scenarios for you, really answer your questions, and give you the correct advice that's going to be so important and have many, many long-lasting effects and consequences. But that's it from our side. Knowledge is power, and it really is up to us to try and get as much knowledge and information as possible to make decisions that's best for us.
Fantastic. It's so true. I think we are so unaware of how we can help ourselves, right? And not acknowledge, ourselves in the sense of our self-worth. And it's not to say that, guys, this is no disrespect to any spouses out there. It is literally protecting each other from certain risks that may be occurred going forward. And that's how I see it as well. Ashley, I want to say thank you so much for your time, coming on a public holiday and taking some time off and just sharing your insights and bringing your wisdom to us. I do appreciate it. Ashley, what I'm going to do is that if you could share your details on the Facebook page for us and also
Sure.
on the group as well. I think if somebody needs to contact you directly, I think they know that there is someone that's there that's willing to listen and advise them. If guys, if you have any questions further, I mean, Ashley is in Cape Town, but I'm sure there's so much of Zoom calls and other, platforms where you guys will be able to connect, even if it's just picking up the call and scheduling a session with Ashley. She is here. She is at the foreground, so please contact her if you guys have any questions or need any advice from a legal perspective when it comes to the prenups or community of practice, just to give you guys some knowledge and some comfort in terms of what are you guys are getting yourselves into. Actually, I think it's better for you, or you can also put it into this comments in here as well. I'm not too sure if you
No,
go
we
on
can
your
stick
bond
to,
list.
or
You
we
can
can
go
stick
on
to the
Facebook.
Facebook page, and yes,
Yeah, you
yeah.
can just go there and I think just put in your details if anybody's looking at contacting you. Actually, I want to say thank you so much. It's been so wonderful having you on, and I've certainly have learned a lot. I have certainly. I never knew there was no such thing as a common law thing. I must be honest
Yes,
with
yeah,
you. I
yeah,
didn't even know that. I've learned so much
yeah.
from this talk,
Yeah.
and I
And
want to
thank
say thank you
you.
so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go
And
ahead,
thank you for
Ashley.
the opportunity, and thank you to Open Mic Foundation really for
Oh,
creating this opportunity for me to kind of impart some of my knowledge and information, and really for your audience to empower themselves. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I really, really do appreciate it.
oh, thank you, Ashley. Yeah, I really, really, appreciate, when women come forth and share their stories and share the insights and, believe in themselves to help other people out there that need the help. And we are all not in a position to help one another. Just listening to someone's stories helps you understand that you're not alone. And we are
Yeah.
not alone. We're really not. Women have come through so much in all the decades and where we are today. And if we cannot help each other, who else are we going to help? Right? So,
Yeah.
Ashley, have a wonderful day. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. I do appreciate all of you joining us today. Take care and have a fantastic week ahead. Thank you so much, Ashley.
Thanks, Seshni. Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye. Bye bye.